So as we alluded to at the start, last week was quite intense. Those of you that were here, there was a huge collection of lamps. Thank you to everyone that brought a lamp. If you left your lamp, please do take it home. We don't need more lamps. And we had this idea of the light. And this idea that that passage was actually saying more about the way that we cast a light upon something, how we see it. It left me incredibly challenged all week, if I'm honest, that I would be in a situation and I would realize how I was thinking of it, what I was actually thinking versus maybe what I was saying, and that challenge to say, you know what, God, I do need to work on the inside still. I need to consider who I am, how I view things. It's one thing to be able to put a good performance on a Sunday, but it's another thing to live out this life that Jesus calls us to. So this week we're going to continue with this theme of light, and we're going to look at that one particular passage about light. So don't worry, we are going there. But I've spent more and more time this week getting excited about that passage. An incredibly well-known passage. And the more time I've spent on it, the more I realize how much there is within it. A passage that for many you could recite. But we watched over Christmas that amazing little video from Francis Chan that reminded us it's not enough just to know the Bible. It's not enough to be able to recite it or maybe know what it means in the Greek. The challenge is, are we going to live it? Are we going to live it? Because Jesus isn't giving us a collection of divine suggestions when he speaks in the Bible. It's not just good advice. He's calling us to commit our lives to him, and this passage is no different. So before we move into the passage, anyone who's not sure which passage it is, don't worry, it will be read. But before we get there, I want to ask a question. How many of you have heard those or used those ridiculous statements that are quite clearly an over-exaggeration? So I'll give you some examples of what they are, because some of you will be a little bit confused. One of them being, were you born in a barn? I love my parents dearly. The number of times they said it to me when both of them were at the hospital is ridiculous. Were you born in a barn? Obviously not. But we use them, don't we? We use these amazing over-the-top statements. Another one, a blessing in disguise, is a classic. Bite the bullet. Seems ridiculous when you actually stop to say it in the middle of a church service. I wonder if anyone can think of any others. Please do feel free to shout out any. I've got a list if no one says anything. Anyone think of any of those statements that we make? There is amazingly large amounts of them. Now in a minute. That's just Wales, isn't it? I've learned to come back now because I have to plan my day. So when Mark says now in a minute, I have to say to him, are we going now or in a minute? Because I don't want to sit here with my coat on for 20 minutes. Now in a minute is a great one. Any others? Clearly all of you use very commonsensical statements. Anyone heard of any of these then? It's not rocket science. Obviously. Anyone who's watched a rocket would know that the level of science that we learn is not rocket science. And many people would know that when a parent says it's not rocket science to a child, they're simply meaning, can you remember to turn the tap off? Go back to the drawing board would suggest that there was ever a plan in place in the beginning. Hit the sack. Miss the boat. How many people have ever actually missed a boat? Okay, a couple of us have, but generally, it's a bizarre saying. The last straw. Again, in context, I'm sure they're brilliant, but in the middle of a house where there is no straw, barking up the wrong tree. Absolute classics. And then the one I want us to consider today, and this one is, I love my dad so dearly, but I reckon this is his single favourite sentence as I grew up. It's like Piccadilly Circus in here. So let's watch a little video about Piccadilly Circus.
It's been lighting up London for more than 100 years, but this morning, Piccadilly Circus went dark. The billboard lights have been switched off for renovations until the autumn. The first electrical advertisements appeared in 1908.
Midnight on Tuesday, August the 14th, 1945. Before the Prime Minister had finished his radio announcement that Japan had surrendered, London went wild.
After the war, Piccadilly Circus was a popular place for Londoners to gather and celebrate. Soon after, it also became a tourist attraction, and the lights have moved with the times, starting with incandescent light bulbs, moving on to neon, digital projectors, and now LEDs.
It will be different because it will be one screen, it will be used flexibly, it will be interactive, and it will be obviously very, very high quality image. And also the way that the advertisers are using the screen will be very different, because currently it's very fixed. So it will be, the advertisers will have the ability to be very creative in how they use the screens.
When the work's completed, Piccadilly Circus will be home to Europe's largest single digital screen. For now, a temporary advertising banner will replace the lights, and until October, the most luminous corner of the capital will be a lot less bright.
I mean, it's not, is it? My single bedroom light is not the single largest video screen in the whole of Europe. The fact that my bedroom light is on, my bedside light is on, I've left the bathroom light on, the hallway light on, and at least 3 lights downstairs still isn't really the same as Piccadilly Circus. A place that lights up a corner of London consistently. But it paints a wonderful picture for us, as do some of these crazy statements, because I want us to carry that image of Piccadilly in our heads as we hear the words that Jesus speaks, because actually there is something about an incredible statement of light that does, other than when they're doing that work, shine out across London. So I'm going to ask my 3 readers if they would come up, and they're going to read for us from Matthew this morning. Thank you to the 3 of you.
Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost his savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven.
So this is the same passage, but from the Message version. Let me tell you why you are here. You're here to be salt seasoning that brings out the God flavours of this earth. If you lose your saltiness, how will people taste godliness? You've lost your usefulness and will end up in the garbage. Here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colours in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. Now that I've put you there on a hilltop, on a light stand, shine. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven.
And I'm reading from the NIV. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven.
Thank you, you 3. An incredible passage, and I think it reads beautifully in nearly every translation and version of it that you can find, this undercurrent of light. Now, I and Laura have spent a huge amount of time recently watching MasterChef. We know the importance of salt, but I'm going to ignore the salt part this morning. It is an amazing part of the passage. There's a huge amount to say, but I want to focus on this challenge of light. And what Jesus is saying as he uses this example for us. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. We're going to very deliberately walk through this passage this morning. There is so much in this. And as is the danger for those of us that have done church for a long time, we get used to these passages. And sometimes we can miss just how rich the words of Jesus are. So we're going to walk through it, and I mean walk through it. You are the light of the world. I'm sure it's an obvious question, but who is Jesus talking to? Anyone want to hazard a guess? The disciples. Jesus is talking to the disciples, but the context in which this discussion is happening is at the beginning of what would be known as the Sermon on the Mount. So actually, when we hear disciples, we often think of the 12. It's fair to say Jesus is talking to the disciples under that mentality of those who choose to follow him. Jesus is very deliberately talking to every individual who has made a choice to follow him, which means every single person in this room who would say, I have chosen to be a follower of Jesus, this is directly spoken to you. Jesus is speaking to all those who have chosen to follow him. We can talk from this baseline. If you are a disciple of Jesus, if you are a follower of him, he is talking to you. Everything that comes after you is about you, not some other you. How sometimes we like to read the Bible, some other people that Jesus is talking about. No, this is about me and you and all of you who would choose to follow him. As we begin, I just want us to focus on what Jesus isn't saying. What Jesus isn't saying is, you who dress right, you who's particularly gifted at public speaking, you who attends everything. Jesus is quite simply saying, you who have chosen to follow me are the light of the world. These are some of the most inclusive words that Jesus speaks. This whole passage is inclusive. Often we think of Jesus as this exclusive entity, that he says things very particularly into very narrow situations. But in this instance, we need to understand this is a passage of inclusivity. There is no one who chooses to follow him that Jesus is not speaking to, which means everything that comes after it is incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. You are the light of the world is an amazing place to begin any morning. But it does mean that now we need to begin to unpick the rest of what he says, beginning to look at it as a statement for my life, for how I go about life. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. A town on a hill cannot be hidden. What's the advantage of a town on a hill? Well, pardon, sorry? You can see everything. It's also, when we consider the time in which it's set, quite easy to protect. It can see everything that's coming, and it can be seen. It's vulnerable in that sense, but it is a great place to be defended from. It's protected. To be built on a hill is to give you the high ground, is to be able to see attacks from far off. The other thing about a city on a hill is it doesn't happen by accident. You don't accidentally carry stones all the way up a hill to build houses and a city. It's a very deliberate act to build a city on a hill. Suddenly the richness of this passage begins to come together when we consider Jesus is talking about us, and now he's saying that you are both protected by being a city on a hill. I will be your protector and your shepherd. And please understand me, I'm also very intentionally putting you where you are. Just a simple passage is beginning to tell us just how invested Jesus is in our whole lives. It's not just convenience. Jesus is taking time to pour into us, to develop us. Jesus is promising to protect us in a location that is a strong place. And Jesus is reminding us that we are visible. A tiny part of this passage says all of those things if we stop to hear them. Protected, intentional, and visible. You. Everyone who chooses to follow him, and we're already at that point. And of course, there's another key element in this that I think sometimes we can overlook. A town built on a hill, other versions are a city built on a hill, cannot be hidden. A single house does not make a town. It is a house. In this passage, Jesus is already beginning to highlight the intentionality that he has for your life and the call on your life to be a part of a community of believers. A gathered people together. Many of you will have heard me say it before and preach on it. But in John 13, we read those words, "They will know you as my followers by the love you have for one another." A town is not a town with one house, and it is very hard to show your love for other disciples if you do not meet with them. Jesus is being incredibly intentional with the way he is speaking here. I wonder what people see when they look at our church. Not the building, but the people. What does Risca see when it looks at us? Because the truth is this, we're not going to be very good at hiding when you consider we are smack in the middle of Risca. So what do people see when they look at this church, at this group of believers? We move on. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. I'm going to take this one a second. A biblical lamp. Fairly close to what they would have used in their houses. It's made of clay. It's got a wick in it. It's filled with oil. An incredibly effective tool. Thank you. And when lit, these incredibly simple lamps will bring light to the house. For us, these passages can become quite difficult to hear. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl, but I have instant access to electricity, so when I press the light switch, the light is there. I pay by direct debit, so I don't even think about the cost of every time I hit that light switch. It's like Piccadilly Circus in here. As these lamps are lit, they begin to create light. And this is how people would have lit their houses as the sun went down. For each individual that was hearing this as Jesus spoke, they would have known that these incredibly simple lamps had oil in them. They would have known how much it costs to buy oil to light a lamp. They would have known the time it took to prepare the wick, to trim it, to make sure that they were getting the optimum light as they were using that precious oil. In fact, we know on numerous accounts that these were the kind of things that as the light went out of an evening, people would light them so they could see their way around the house, they could do their chores. We read it's how they would look for lost coins. So it begs the question. It begs the question of why anyone would light a lamp and place it under a bowl. If they knew how much time and effort and cost had gone into this, why would you light it simply to hide it under a bowl? That's a silly statement, Jesus. No one would do that. Or do they? What happens when we place a lamp under a bowl? Well, eventually it will go out. But here lies the amazing part of this passage. Jesus isn't talking just on one level here. I believe as he has already exampled in the other two parts we've looked at, there is so much more happening. Because yes, it will go out. But Jesus is also saying, what's the point in placing a lamp under a bowl? Well, the point of what he's saying is that it's not visible anymore. That's the first thing. When you place a lit lamp under a bowl, it is no longer visible to anybody. its purpose is null and void. And then secondly, he's warning us that this bowl that is placed over the lamp will starve it of oxygen, and if everything's worked as it should in science, which it didn't, pretend it did, it will go out. The bowl's too big, I used a smaller one at home. If you place a lamp which requires oxygen under a bowl, it is no longer having a purpose to light up the room, and it will also be starved of oxygen and go out eventually. We've established Jesus is talking to all of us who choose to follow him, so we have to ask this question at this point. What bowls are we placing over the lamp that Jesus has lit within us? What bowls are we placing over the lamp that Jesus has lit within us? If I'm not pouring time into his word, if I'm not committed to spending time talking and listening to God in prayer, if I'm not devoting myself to the fellowship of believers and to the teaching of the apostles, then what I'm actually doing is inadvertently placing bowls over the lamp that Jesus has lit. If I'm neglecting to fuel the fire that he's lit within me, then I am starving it of oxygen. You see, Jesus isn't planning to light you up like a lamp and then hide you away. It's an occupational hazard of being a disciple of Jesus that means you will be used and you will be seen. That's what this passage is saying. If you follow me, then you will be used, you will be seen. Because to produce light, there was time and effort poured in. It's a very deliberate act. There was sacrifice made. So when we begin to look at it in our lives, we understand that there is time and effort to be poured in. There is sacrifices to be made. It will take time, but it will be a part of who we are, to be a source of light. Jesus wants you to know that he isn't just pouring into you so you can hide away in here. I wonder if Jesus said these words, he realized that eventually the building we would come to meet him in would be, for many, the bowl that hid all he was doing in their lives. Jesus didn't pour into you so you can hide away in here. In fact, he didn't go to the cross just so we can sit comfortably waiting for heaven. We read these words as he teaches us to pray. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You are the light of the world. Your call is to bring heaven to earth, to be that light. Jesus pours into you. He's trimmed the rough edges of our lives. He paid the ultimate price on the cross. Why? So you can shine bright. So you can be light that this dark world needs. Lord, would you mind trying to relight the one that I definitely stubbed out a bit hard? Why did Jesus go to all of that effort? Why does he then bring teaching like this? It's because he has poured into you. And he's trimming off the rough edges of your character. And he's lighting you up so that a dark and dangerous and sad world can see that there is light. Nobody lights a lamp and puts it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. Jesus is telling you that your calling in life, if you choose to follow him, is to shine bright enough for everyone to see it. Remember what Jesus isn't saying. You pastor are the light of the world. No. You eloquent speaker. No. You who know the whole but no. You. If you have chosen to follow me up this mountainside, I am now speaking to you. So if you have made a choice in your life to follow Jesus, this whole passage is for you. And he is lighting you up, and he is intentional in placing you on a stand. So it leaves another question for us. How has your light, how has your life lit up someone else's? How? If I'm not sharing the good news of the gospel with someone, I am fundamentally failing to be the light that I am called to be. We've spent enough time together and we've heard enough stories to know sometimes, in fact oftentimes in today's society, it's not really what I'm saying that is going to be the light. It's going to be how I'm living. The way I conduct myself, the way I respond to situations is the way that people are viewing that light that shines from within me. It's an amazing passage, a passage that doesn't really leave a huge amount of room for religiosity. In fact, as we read this passage, it becomes less and less relevant to a Sunday morning and far more relevant to a life of practicing discipleship. This whole passage is talking about way more than 2 hours on a Sunday morning. It's talking about every single day. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Every single day, a lamp is not lit and placed under a bowl. Every single day, you are on display, shining bright. Jesus leaves us no wiggle room whatsoever. And for anyone who thinks there may be a smidge of wiggle room, some of you will have used this line. I've used some of these lines. But there is no room for the age-old statement of it's my own personal faith. Nope. Maybe you're one of these people that uses the line, I'm not very good at talking to new people. Not a huge amount of wiggle room. Another classic that many of us will use, I just don't have any gifts or skills that God could use. Nope. You. It's the only disclaimer that Jesus places on this passage. You. If you have chosen to follow me, everything that comes after is for you. Every excuse, every reason that you could use to dismiss everything Jesus said is lost when you made the choice to follow him. That's what this is telling us. So Jesus closes with this amazing line. In the same way, all the examples we've seen, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. A light that is lit is not just placed under a bowl. Instead, it is put out on display to light up the whole space. Why do you put it on a lampstand? Because hopefully it will stop you casting huge shadows by putting it behind a pillar or something stupid like that. It's an intentional statement that Jesus is saying of everyday objects. The first listeners knew exactly what he was saying. And then he says this. The get out of jail free card that we maybe thought we could play is lost when he says these lines. In the same way, let your, who's your? You. All those who have chosen to follow Jesus, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. A city, a lamp, and you. A city cannot be hidden. And there is no one in their right mind that lights a lamp without allowing it to shine brightly. And then you. You are called to shine bright. You are called to be light, to break through the darkness that we see around us. Jesus is saying to every one of us who has chosen to follow him, I am pouring into you. I've paid a price for you, and I will light you up so that you can make a difference in this world. This is a passage full of challenge and full of incredible promise. Monday just got so much more exciting for at least 10 of us, but hopefully all of us, because suddenly on Monday morning, I'm now not going, oh my gosh, I need so much coffee to get through the day. We're going, hang on a minute. The minute I walk out of my house, whatever I'm doing, going to work, going to see friends, just going for a wander with the dog, the minute I walk out my house, the call on my life is to let my light shine before others. How do I greet people that I walk past? Am I polite to the person that opens the gate in the car park? Am I going to make time for people? Am I going to engage in people? And when they look at me, are they going to see light shining out, or are they going to see another grumpy Monday morning person? There is zero wiggle room. There is no one in this space who Jesus is not talking to if you have chosen to follow him. So Monday morning means, in the same way, let your light shine before others. You have a purpose for Monday morning, given by Jesus. What an incredible privilege. What an incredible privilege. Jesus is saying, I am pouring into you, I've paid a price for you, and I will light you up to make a difference in this world. And when that light shines, it will reveal the Father in heaven. When that light shines, it will reveal your Father in heaven. So as I close, I want to ask 3 questions. Where can you shine your light this coming week to allow others to see more clearly? Where can you uniquely shine this week that will allow others to see more clearly? Where can you shine hope that will allow others to see there is a better way forward than that which they see through the gloom? Where can you shine hope? And where can you shine this week so that others can see the goodness of God for themselves? Where can you shine where others will see the goodness of God for themselves? Jesus is telling you your life can be a beacon for God. What an incredible privilege. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven.